IB Nation Sports Talk up rolling on a Thursday. We've got so much to get to. These Thursday shows, man, they fill up fast. We do we in, we out. We've got the Marcus Freeman comments from earlier today, a lot of quarterback talk on today's show, from Riley Leonard to sprinkles of Angeli and some CJ Carr in there as well. Just to clarify, Jesse posted this, looking for his good friend Anthony P, because the Pittsburgh Pirates Paul Skeens talk earlier this week. Anthony is outside staining his deck, but he is listening. He's not going to be able to see you. You look a little bit like Paul Skeens right now with that Pirates hat on and that mustache of yours.
Some would say a more handsome Paul Skeens, but
some. I don't know who, but
I told Anthony that if Skeens had an ERA under 3 after 20 games, I'd eat my pants. I can't really eat pants, so I decided I would go on and put on this Pirates hats for the show in honor of Anthony. So, Anthony, I know you're staying in your deck, but I hope you go back and rewatch it and live this glorious moment of me wearing this Pittsburgh Pirates hat.
He said he's taking a break. He's taking a break right now. So, all right. Got his Pirates hat on, the number one Cubs fan, Jesse, with his Pirates hat on for today's show. Well, we got to talk to Marcus Freeman this afternoon, and we've got we in, we out questions coming up a little bit, by the way, but got to talk with him. And as you can imagine, on his Thursday media call, quarterbacks came up. Were you expecting quarterbacks to come up today?
No. Why would quarterbacks come up today?
I know. Like, how could that happen? So have you actually heard the comments that Freeman made to NBC sideline reporter Zora Stevenson before the game last week?
I don't think I did.
Have you read them? Or do you just kind of know the gist of them?
I know the gist of it. I would a light refresher always helps.
Okay. We will do that. So this was asked about the comments that he made on NBC before the game about, this is what he said on NBC to Zora Stevenson, their sideline reporter, about what he wanted from Riley Leonard against Northern Illinois.
I want to play within the offense. We don't need anything spectacular. Do exactly what your coaches tell you to do. Play within the game plan, and the rest will take care of itself. If we start trying to make plays and throw the ball down the field, then all of a sudden we're playing out of character. Just do exactly what we want you to do, and the rest will take care of itself.
Just do exactly what we want you to do, and the rest will take care of itself. So any initial thoughts on that before I play his explanation to that from earlier this afternoon?
Yeah, I think some kind of preliminary thoughts, and I might have, said a little bit of this on Tuesday when we were talking about quarterbacks. I really believe that Riley Leonard has, a specific skill set that makes him kind of the dual threat quarterback that he is. And I think that at times, during Marcus Freeman's tenure, he has a specific idea of what he wants the offense to look like. And to me, it kind of sounds like we don't want Riley Leonard just running around all over the field, potentially, turning the ball over, is what it sounded like to me. And I think that Marcus Freeman was really trying to impose, a certain skill set onto Riley Leonard rather than taking Riley Leonard's skill set and kind of turning that into the game plan. And I think that's kind of where the issue lies at the moment.
Felt to a lot of people like they were basically putting the clamps on Riley Leonard, trying to force him into a box, square peg in a round hole, however you want to look at it. Like they wanted it, like they wanted to be the puppet master. They only wanted Riley Leonard to do exactly what they wanted him to do. So Freeman asked about those comments today, and here is his explanation for those comments.
My comments with Zora to be misconstrued that me and Riley weren't on the same page. I think Riley was excited for the opportunity to go out there and compete on Saturday. And I was really intent on making sure our guys focus on just getting their job done, doing the job that the coaches tell them to do. And that's probably more so what I meant by those comments.
So I don't know. Whoops. I put the wrong thing in there. I don't know, Jess. When I hear that, like, does that really explain the initial comment? It really just feels like maybe not as forcefully, but almost just kind of saying the same thing, like we wanted him to do what the coaches wanted him to do. What did you think?
Yeah, I think it's really a statement that kind of shows a lack of confidence in your quarterback overall. And I think that you saw times, on both sides of the ball last week where guys were maybe trying to make the perfect play rather than, kind of going out and just playing football, essentially. And I think when you start talking about, well, you got to do this or you can't make mistakes here, I think it takes away some of the confidence and freeness that some of these players can play with, basically backyard football. And I know that Notre Dame is, it needs to be more organized than backyard football, but at times you just got to let these players do their thing and, play in space essentially. And you can't tell me that Notre Dame's players can't play in space better than NIU players. And so when you start to constrain them and restrict them and say, these are the things you can and can't do, and you don't want to do this and do this, it really starts to kind of mentally play with you as a player. And rather than just kind of, free playing, now you're sitting there and it slows you down, honestly, as well.
Well, and if the message is also, if part of the message, even though he didn't say it, but I mean, like with the initial comments that he made, the initial comments down there on the field, play within the game, the rest will take care of itself. You don't need to do anything spectacular. Do exactly what your coaches tell you to do. If we start trying to make plays and throw the ball downfield, then all of a sudden we're playing out of character. Just do exactly what we tell you to do. I mean, it feels like Marcus Freeman is so afraid of Riley Leonard making a turnover that's like, it's like simple psychology, like if you say, don't jump, what your brain actually hears is jump, just as an example, like if you put a don't in front of something, what your brain actually hears is the something that comes behind the don't, so obviously that Saturday was the first time in Riley Leonard's career that he had multiple interceptions in the same game. And it just feels like, again, like trying to corral the stallion rather than just letting the stallion go out there, kind of piggybacking on what you were saying, just letting him play, letting him be himself. That's where he's had success in the past. Now again, like there's more to the game than just the deep ball. I get what you're talking about, but like Andrew, there were other passes there, like on that same route. There were open receivers on the same route who weren't as deep, and that was the decision to make that play. I'm not saying he has to cut it loose and just go out there winging it and letting it fly, but
just trust your instincts.
He's not a pocket quarterback, and it sure seemed like they wanted him to stand in the pocket and be a pocket quarterback for a lot of the day Saturday.
Yeah.
What did you think?
I agree. And I think kind of, the best comparison I can maybe make is when Jalen Hurts was kind of in college, right? Like he wasn't known as the greatest passer, and he was obviously more mobile and can do a lot of work with his feet, especially at Oklahoma. And I think that's the kind of, and again, I'm not trying to say that that's, Riley Leonard has the same skill set or the same amount of talent, but that's kind of who I think about, of a guy who can use his legs to get others open. You know what I mean? Like as he's kind of moving the pocket a little bit and using his legs, he has the decision, to allow those wide receivers to maybe get open, to start moving around a little bit, find some holes in the zone or in coverage. And if he doesn't see it, just tuck it and pick up a couple yards. And honestly, what I was thinking about too, like Riley Leonard can still run the ball as long as he makes a concerted effort to step out of bounds, to slide. Like you can do a lot of things to be preventative in taking hits. And so I don't think his legs are completely, taken away from him. So again, if you can move the pocket with your legs a little bit, allow the defense to have to guard you even longer, allow your wide receivers to sit down in some holes or some zone spots. Okay, if it's not there, then I'm just going to tuck it, gain 2, 3, 4 yards, and get out of bounds, essentially. And I think that kind of has to be, the way this offense operates around Riley Leonard.
Right. And so as we look at the Riley Leonard that we saw Saturday versus the Riley Leonard that had success at Duke, and again, he was never going to be a 70% passer. That's not what he was at Duke. I don't think anyone realistically expected that was what he was going to be coming here to Notre Dame. He was able to make plays in different ways at Duke. But, again, when you talk about the mindset, what the head coach expects via the offensive coordinator and the quarterback coach, and then you throw the quarterback into the mix as well, are they all on the same page? How do they get on the same page?
As far as, making sure that the coaches and players are on the same page, it does take time, right? Like anything that we've done, anything we do with experience comes improvement. And I think what Riley and Coach Denbrock and Coach Dooley, they're continuously being intentional about making sure like we are very clear on what we want out of the plays that we call. Sometimes, we might give too much freedom. We have to make sure that we are very clear on what is expected. But there also is a part of playing the game at quarterback that you have to give them certain freedoms to make good decisions. And so that's just been something that I think we've been continuously working on. It's important that us as coaches, we call plays that our players feel very confident about. They feel confident about what is expected, what they like, what they don't like. And that's something I think that we as a staff and especially our offense staff has done this week in making sure that, hey, what plays are you confident in? How do we make sure that we design plays that there's clarity, right? And that, you feel very confident about the looks you'll see defensively, about your options on offense. And again, it does take time, but I think we can expedite that process with intentional conversations and meetings and practice and all those different things that go into preparing for a game.
So the fact that they have to expedite the process and he's saying it takes time, they're not on the same page, obviously, right now. And you hear some of the things that he said in the first part of that soundbite right there. He says that, Coach Denbrock, Coach Gaduli, continuously being intentional about making sure we're very clear on what we want out of the plays we call. Sometimes we might give too much freedom. We have to make sure we are very clear on what is expected. Again, it just sounds like they're trying to put constraints on this guy. And the more I listen to it and based on what we have seen so far, I have no idea why they brought Riley Leonard into this program. If this is sort of the direction that they're trying to go with him. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's very obvious that Marcus Freeman, Mike Denbrock, Riley Leonard, Gaduli, everyone that's got a hand in this quarterback development / offensive design are not on the same page. And it's really frustrating because, I get it that he was out during the spring, but you had the entire fall. You had a camp for a reason. Now is not really the time to kind of be figuring out or determining what plays your quarterback likes best or what plays are going to work best for
right. Now, granted,
what you want.
They didn't have a chance to do that in the spring because he was injured for most of the spring.
Yeah, but he still was there for all of the,
right.
Even though he wasn't fully
he knows
participating.
How things operate. Yeah.
Right. He knows how the offense operates. And so, yeah, it's really frustrating. now is not the time, 3 weeks into the season to be determining, is this ultimately what works best for our quarterback, or what plays do our quarterbacks like, or does our quarterback like to run the most? Is he able to run the best? That should have been determined game one. You should be building off of, stuff by now, not kind of going back to the drawing board essentially. So, as a fan, that is really concerning to hear. And I would have to echo what you just said. You knew what Riley Leonard was coming out of the portal. I don't see Chip Kelly down at Ohio State, altering what kind of offense that they want to run with Will Howard, because that's a similar type of quarterback as Riley Leonard, a guy that is, a dual threat, can throw the ball. Had maybe some questions about whether or not he can throw the ball. I don't see Chip Kelly down there at Ohio State being like, you know what, game 3, let's scratch here and try to figure out, what our quarterback can do here. And so it's really frustrating and concerning. So why did you bring him in if you, Marcus Freeman, want to run a more pro-style offense? Because that's all you have to say, like those straight drop backs and going through progressions and, all that stuff. I get it, but if you want a pro-style quarterback as well, why are you not running the ball more too? And that's the other kind of crazy aspect of this thing, because a pro-style offense does rely on running the ball, but you abandoned running the ball the entire second half.
Yeah.
So that's also frustrating as well.
If you're worried about your quarterback throwing the ball around and potentially turning it over, then why aren't you? And, because even when Riley Leonard was throwing, and I want to put this comment up here from USMA 87, I think it's a great observation. He said he rewatched some of the game. So many of the passes are to receivers standing still. The big misses were to receivers on the move. And that's right. Like you see, these stop routes and these digs and all these different routes like that, where it is a lot more stagnant. Really, it kind of reminds me a little bit of what Kellen Moore was doing, when he was still with the Dallas Cowboys. You saw far less fluidity and movement from the receivers. You saw a lot of standing still. And I don't know if they think that that's what suits Riley Leonard best, since he wasn't a big bombs away type guy at Duke. Most of the stuff that you saw was shorter and intermediate type stuff. But again, those passes are there. It's just that he's not making very many of them. And even the ones that he was attempting and some of them making, it just like he looked to me like he was hesitant, almost at times like he was trying to, aim the ball in there and guide it in there with some of those short throws. It just did not look very natural, anything that he was doing last week.
I think that comes with the mindset of, I can't lose this game. You know what I mean? Like, I felt like Riley Leonard was trying not to lose the game rather than just going out and playing his brand of football and winning a football game. I think he did that on the first drive of the game when they went down there and he got in on that touchdown. Like, that's Riley Leonard football right there. Yeah. I didn't see a drive that felt like that the rest of the way. And I don't know if that's, when that shoulder comes into play, but he was running after that.
The shoulder was still later in the half. Like, it didn't happen right away. There were still series after that where it's like, what are you doing now? Why aren't you doing some of those same things? It's like, well, we'll take some of that running and doing some of these things early on, but okay, now we've got some points, so we want to avoid that as much as possible. That's kind of.
And I think it goes back to, like, look at. I just remember seeing Riley Leonard's face after NIU got that last field goal, and he didn't look like a guy that had the confidence that he was going to go down and get a field goal, and Notre Dame was going to win this football game. And he kind of had that deer in the headlights look,
which is shocking considering he led a game-winning touchdown drive just a week prior
at Kyle Field against the top, 25 opponent, one of the toughest environments to play in. And so I don't understand what happened. Marcus Freeman talks about how they had such a good week of practice and he was going to focus on, the not having a letdown and all of these things. And it's like, well, did you go so far to say, here's the things that we have to do. And we can't do these things and we can't do those things that I don't think anyone really had confidence in what they were doing. And most specifically, the most important person, Riley Leonard, had no confidence in what he was doing. So because that goes to how, like you were talking about how he's guiding passes. That's to me, that's a symptom of no confidence. You're trying to just like almost shot put the ball right to where it needs to go.
Like he would hand it to the receiver
Right.
if he could, basically. So this week, we've had the report about the injury to his non-throwing shoulder. Mike Denbrock said, I guess it was just what that was 2 days ago. It was Tuesday, and we talked about it yesterday. But Mike Denbrock said Riley Leonard's been out there practicing. They have no reason to believe that that he can't be a runner of the football and basically can't play the quarterback position. And so Marcus Freeman asked today about what Riley Leonard's role has looked like this week at practice, as well as the other quarterbacks.
Nobody's roles have changed. Riley's had a really good week of practice, has made some really good throws and done a really good job at decision making, taking care of the football, and everybody else has been done a great job too in terms of what they've been asked to do. But nobody's been asked to do anything differently this week than previously.
So the depth chart remains the same, according to Marcus Freeman, and that means Riley Leonard is number 1, Steve Angeli is number 2, Kenny Minchie is number 3, and CJ Carr is number 4. And we're going to save the Carr discussion and some of Marcus Freeman's comments on CJ Carr for rapid fire. I guess the bottom line is right now, Jesse, as happy Notre Dame fan, I don't know if there's some irony, sarcasm in that handle. Who do you want to start at quarterback? Should it be Riley Leonard? Should it be Steve Angeli? Because then, like some other people like KBA, play Angeli in the first half, Carr in the second half. Then you can always throw Kenny Minchie in the mix too. And then he says, he or she, Angeli first half, Carr in the second half, Kenny. Like, are we just playing a junior high game out there and we're going to throw all these different quarterbacks in the game? I don't think that's really how it works. Again, we're going to save the CJ Carr part for rapid fire, KBA. So hold on tight tonight, because like I said, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. What do you think of the top, though? Like, who are you good with Riley Leonard starting? Do you think it should be Steve Angeli? Do they need to make a change this week?
So I kind of want to just a quick before I answer this question.
Okay.
And that last Marcus Freeman soundbite, he basically I didn't like what I heard, because all he said was, well, Riley Leonard has taken care of the ball this week, and so you're still echoing the same thing in practice that
still
you just
hammering into him.
It basically is the same thing that he said to Zora before the game, and he just echoed it in his Thursday press conference after they've had a whole week of practice, that he liked what he saw out of Riley Leonard because he was taking care of the football. So again, like, what are we doing? Are we asking someone not to generate big plays, explosive plays, and score? Or are we asking someone to take care of the ball and, well, if we don't score, we don't score, but as long as you don't turn the ball, I'm not really liking that.
Honestly, if that's your emphasis, you'd probably be better with Steve Angeli out there, if that's the only thing you're prioritizing. Like, if you're not prioritizing the ability to make play with his legs, to lead game-winning drives like he did against Texas A&M, those kind of things, you might just be better with Angeli.
Yeah, and so that kind of leads me into, I would still start Riley Leonard out there against Purdue this week. But if there's just a lot of kind of other moving parts around that answer, if it's a Riley Leonard because a Mike Denbrock offense is better run by a quarterback like Riley Leonard, a guy with,
Correct.
mobility, can move
Which
the
again
pocket.
is shocking that they're handcuffing him as much as they are.
Right. And so if you're letting him play a true Mike Denbrock offense, then yeah, I think Riley Leonard is the better option.
Because again, think about it, not to complete, I'm cutting you off, but this just kind of popped into my head. Again, like, this is not a guy who never threw interceptions at Duke, but he never had a multi-interception game. And I don't think that Mike Elko and his staff were beating into his head so hard the don't turn the ball over thing. He had multiple interceptions for the first time in his career against Northern Illinois last week. And apparently all that they, the main thing they're emphasizing with him is don't turn the ball over. And again, it comes back. That's all that's all they're talking about. And he's playing very tight. He's not playing anywhere near, like what we saw at Duke, and again, like that's not what we necessarily saw against Texas A&M either, when they were, just letting him make plays.
Yeah. And so if this is an offense that truly is allowing Riley Leonard to play, then of course Riley Leonard is the option. He better fits Mike Denbrock's offense and the overall kind of goals and thought process of, the design of Mike Denbrock's offense. However, if he's forced into, what we've seen the last couple of weeks and, what Marcus Freeman kind of keeps emphasizing, if he comes out and has a bad first half and the shoulder is limited and he can't make, we don't see as many design runs out of him, I think you have, and especially if you're losing too. If you're losing at halftime,
hang on. You're jumping ahead because we got the final soundbite for Marcus Freeman. You're kind of leading into that. So let's play that, and then we can have this conversation that you're kind of leading to here. So Leonard is going to be the starter. So if he struggles, what would it take to make a change at quarterback during the game?
I don't know if there's an exact parameter. We have to have success. We have to move the ball. We got to score points. And so if we're not able to do that, then you got to make changes. But there was no consideration of changing Riley that last game.
So now, Jess, what would it take for you to make a move if you start Riley Leonard and things aren't going the way you want?
I think if you're losing at halftime and you see no improvement in the passing game, you have to make a move, in order to kind of free some things up. And, I would like to see them, again, try to run the ball more this week. I think you can start with a kind of run heavy. I mean, again, Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love have made, all the explosive plays really on offense for Notre Dame this season. They account for majority of the touchdowns. I think you start with, a kind of a power run type situation, try to open up the pass. And, if you're down against Purdue at half and the pass game is not moving anywhere and they're still loading up the box and, you can't do anything against man-to-man coverage, I think you got to find someone who can at least get 3-4 yards out of the passing game to allow the running game to also, set up as best as possible. So, there's a lot of factors that go into this because of, what we've been talking about of why get Riley Leonard if you're not going to let him play, a specific type of football. And if you're not going to let him play a specific, type of football that's better to his skills, he can't run the ball, he can't be a true dual threat guy, and now he can't pass the ball either. I mean, at some point you got to cut the cord and go with the guy that's going to play better in the offense that you want to run, because you're not running an offense that's tailored for Riley Leonard at this point.
No, not at all. Not at all. Salty says, can't put these restrictions on Jesse. You can't make him play in your box. He's better when he's freewheeling. Now he's thinking about things. Interesting question from Scott. Is Riley Leonard the type of player that thrives more in an underdog role? I mean, he is coming from Duke, where they were almost always an underdog. I don't know about the underdog part, but I will say, and Mike Denbrock talked about this when he talked with the media this week as well, there's a much bigger spotlight at Notre Dame. And it felt to me like, without knowing any of these comments that Marcus Freeman made, on NBC before the game about what they wanted from him and all these different things, just like watching him throughout the majority of the first half felt like, is this pressure / excitement or whatever of playing inside Notre Dame Stadium for the first time as the Notre Dame quarterback? Like, was that getting to Riley Leonard? Because he didn't look like a confident quarterback at all, with, really with the exception of that first touchdown drive that you talked about. But again, that was when he was playing his game and doing his thing. But the rest of the half, he just looked off on everything that he was doing, from getting out of the pocket too early, from those, kind of like, short arm throws and stuff like that he was making, all these different things. And so I don't know. It's a good question. Maybe some of that factors into this as well, where there are so many, because what was the expectation at Duke? You just want to have a winning season and go to the Duke's Mayo Bowl, right? Like when you're at Notre Dame, everyone starts talking national championship right away. So there's obviously a much different level of expectation and pressure that comes with playing here compared to really just about any place else in the ACC, with the exception of probably Clemson and Florida State.
I don't really buy the whole pressure aspect of this thing. I think Riley Leonard is a highly confident young man, and I think that he, relies on his faith ultimately to kind of, be the confident person that he is. I just think, and again, I'm not trying to, be kind of the Debbie Downer in this situation, but I really think when your head coach is, telling you these are the things we need you to do and not do, and this is, and you're not really running an offense that you maybe feel like is tailoring to your skills. Well, now I got to go out there and not do these things, and I can't even try to do it to the best of my ability because my coach isn't allowing me to kind of play the type of ball that I'm good at, right? And so when you're asked not to do certain things and not do X, Y, Z, and then you're also, hampered by the fact that you can't play exactly how you want to play, to me, those are two negative things that equate to not a lot of confidence, essentially, at the end of the day.
Right.
So I don't buy the pressure thing. I think, he's played harder opponents at Duke than NIU. He's played on bigger stages, at Duke compared to just a home game against NIU on a Saturday, right? And again, it's all a mental confidence thing. I don't necessarily buy that he's succumbing to the pressure.
So you don't think it's pressure. You think it's more they need to be telling him, they need to be, and we've heard this from them before, they essentially need to be focusing more on what he does right and what they like him doing than what they don't want him doing.
Yeah, I mean, again, I feel like I've talked about this a ton before and made this kind of comparison, but you're going to see it tonight for anyone that watches the Dolphins and Bills game. Tua has limitations as a quarterback. Mike McDaniels found a way to tailor what he has, Tua and the surrounding wide receivers. I get he has Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle is also a good wide receiver. But, I mean, again, Tua is not the greatest pocket quarterback in the NFL, but they find ways to tailor an offense around him to be as potent as possible. And I guarantee if someone else was the quarterback in there, that offense wouldn't look the same as it does with Tua there. And that's kind of the approach that you have to take with Riley Leonard is, yeah, he might not do everything the way you want, but he has a specific skill set. And what are we doing to kind of combine what Mike Denbrock is good at and what Riley Leonard is good at the end of the day to allow this offense to have as much confidence as possible?
Yeah, and I guess, what was it, back during training camp when Tua, it would have been, since the NFL season's only a week old, but Tua was talking about when he had Flores there as the head coach versus when Mike McDaniel showed up. And again, the difference in what he was being told, like all Flores was talking about, you're not good at this, you're not there, all
right.
These things that he's not. And then he left, McDaniel shows up and starts telling him, dude, you're a stud. And, you're just,
I've watched hours of your film. Do you remember this sexy play that you made?
I was watching your sexiness on YouTube and all that different,
that's the
stuff.
way you got to talk to your quarterback. And so
right.
It feels like, not to be dramatic, but it feels like Marcus Freeman is Flores in this instance, just being like, well, you can't do this and you can't do that and don't do this and don't turn the ball over. And it's like, well, what kind of confidence does that instill in your quarterback?
Tom, I don't know how there's a difference between a pro coach and a college coach in this instance, because all we're talking about is confidence.
Mindset.
Yeah, we're talking, again, like the mental aspect, basically just building up confidence. That's all it, and that's whether it's a pro coach or a college coach, that's so much of the job these days. Like we've talked to plenty of them, whether it's the coaches or the players or whoever. That's so much a part of the deal. And that was supposed to be part of, the deal with Marcus Freeman, the way he interacted with players, obviously, and the relationships and all these different things. So it just seems like there is just a very odd dynamic.
Well, and then too, it's like this is the same Marcus Freeman that walked out with his offensive line at Texas A&M and was pumping them up and doing all these things to give them confidence. And it's like, why are you not doing that across the board? Why are you not doing that, with your quarterback essentially, right? Like it doesn't seem to carry over. And you don't have
Marcus Freeman, like, should he be like the 49ers boombox guy? Like he's walking.
I was just getting ready to say,
like,
instilling confidence in your quarterback doesn't look like, the guy that's yelling and getting everyone, like, you can do other things.
Yeah, you don't have to be a cheerleader. You just have to put the right things in his ears and build the right frame of mind, because the quarterback is the most important position on the field. So channeling to the positive side of his brain feels like it's just a lot more important than beating into him these negatives that it sounds like. Because again, like, they come out in all these comments that Marcus Freeman is talking about. I think that he thinks that he's found a way, to explain or rationalize, going back to the stuff with Zora Stevenson that he's talking about. But it all just points, the more you listen to it, they all point in a different direction to me than I think what he, the way he thinks that it's coming across. I think that's how it comes across to me anyway.
Yeah.
This is a good question, Andrew. He says, what do we think about the actual offense Denbrock installed? Is it an offense that suits Leonard? I don't know what this offense is right now. I have no idea what it is.
That's the issue. There's no identity on
Is
the
this
offense.
really Denbrock's offense? It doesn't look like what he was doing at LSU. Is this really Denbrock's offense, or is it Denbrock's offense with, specific to Riley Leonard and what they're trying to get from Riley Leonard? And how much would it look different if you did have another quarterback in the mix? I mean, basic answer to your question right now, is it an offense that suits Leonard based on the results that we've seen so far? No. But, again, it doesn't feel like this is completely the offense that Mike Denbrock packed in a suitcase and brought north from Baton Rouge to me.
Well, I guess the frustrating
Or
part
that we thought that he did anyway.
is, I'm just going to flat out say it. Why is Marcus Freeman so involved in the offense as a guy that has a background in defense, right? Like, you can do things to kind of be like, hey, like, here's maybe where we want to run the ball or where we want to pass the ball, or, get into specific parts of the field of, hey, here's what I'm kind of looking for. But how they go about doing that, to me, should be completely on the shoulders of the offensive coordinator, right? Like, do what you need to do schematically, do what you need to do to get our quarterback to play a certain way. Just give me the result I need of, being able to run the ball here, pass the ball here, get a, kill some clock here, get some, maybe a field goal here, whatever it might be, 2-minute offense. I think Marcus Freeman needs to step back and just be like, okay, again, here's what I'm overall looking for, kind of big picture. Now on a micro level, do what you need to do schematically wise to make that happen.
Andrew asked, where are all the RPOs? It's interesting because, like when we were texting during the Texas A&M game, it appeared that there were some misreads that Leonard was making on RPOs, right?
Yeah. A lot of times where he could have pulled it and I think kept
and you didn't see those this last week because I think that they didn't feel confident. And that's, Irish for Life 99, 1 RPO last week. And I think that that's why, because like he was making some misreads against Texas A&M, and I don't think that they were as confident in him being able to make those reads. And again, like you look at a guy like Riley Leonard, it's pretty surprising that would be something that would be confusing him.
Again, RPOs though is what it should be in the wheelhouse of the Riley Leonard offense. Because especially with the running backs that they have, you can fake to those running backs, get them passing. Okay, let me restart. First option, you can just hand it off to the running backs, and we've seen that they have their ability to make the run game go. You can fake it and allow the running back to also get involved in the pass game. But even when you're faking it, now Riley Leonard has two options. I can get around the edge here and get some yards with my feet, or B, I can move this pocket a little bit. And going back to what we were talking about a little bit ago, I can get the pocket moving here a little bit. And now those throws become easier because the defense has to shift with your offensive guys downfield. They can find, little spots in the hole in the zone. And Riley Leonard just finds the spot that he likes and he just dumps it out, right? Like an RPO offense should be in Riley Leonard's wheelhouse because it allows him to use his best attribute, his feet. It allows his feet to open up the passing game or to develop the passing game. And so not seeing that happen is a real frustration.
I agree. Look, there's a lot more quarterback stuff that's going to come in we in, we out with these we in, we out questions. So we will get to we'll jump in to that. And again, we've got some CJ Carr stuff and more quarterback stuff coming up in rapid fire after that as well. So let's just go ahead and get into we in, we out tonight. Let's start with Joe. Marcus Freeman's statement that they have to learn how to handle success is really just an excuse, considering they weren't that successful when they lost to Marshall, Stanford, Louisville, and Clemson. In or out on that? Coming in hot right off the bat.
Yeah, I'm really in on this one. And, I think I brought it up on the Tuesday show. That's something that should have never really left Marcus Freeman's mouth. I don't think that's a comment that you say, we have to learn how to handle success. That's your job. It's your job to not allow the distractions to come in about success. It's a singular, weekly focus. And I guess what I'm most hopeful about now is that this team just plays hungrier, because I think, this is one of my favorite quotes from one of my defensive coordinators in college. A hungrier dog is going to hunt harder, right? Notre Dame has one loss at this point. They know what that feeling feels like, and they can't really lose again if they want to reach some of their long-term goals. And so I think you have to be hungrier. And this type, that feeling and how you played should ultimately motivate you at the end of the day. And if Marcus Freeman's the type of coach that we think he is, he should allow that to motivate his team. He should allow it to make them hungrier, because your backs are up against the wall now and you don't have any more room for error.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, as Joe lays out, it's more than just not knowing how to win after having success. He said in that comment, well, this is the first time we've won the big game to start the season. Well, okay, go back to year one. You lost the big game against Ohio State, and then you turned around and you lost to Marshall the next week in the very first game, as head coach of your career, very first home game of your career. And then a few weeks later, you turned around and laid a massive egg against Stanford. Now, in between, they got up and they beat, I think it was 3 ranked teams that season, including, at least from an offensive standpoint, an NFL quarterback in Drake May in a pretty good team. They beat a ranked BYU team that year, and they beat a top 5 team, obviously, in Clemson. So, and they got up for all of those games, but you played completely flat against Marshall and Stanford. And then last year, okay, you had a big emotional win at Duke against Riley Leonard. You won at Duke, but then you come out and were a complete no-show against Louisville. And that's on both sides of the ball. It was mostly on offense with all the turnovers that they had. But, then again, okay, kind of stabilize a little bit, and then you go and you lay another one at Clemson. It's a track record now that this is not just a one-off situation, that you have a hard time getting your team to consistently prepare and focus week in, week out. When you have now 5 examples of how you should have played a lot better than what you did. Because like last year, we wrote it all off to, well, it's road struggles at Louisville, at Clemson, against, like in Louisville's case, obviously turned out to be a pretty good team. Clemson still had a pretty good defense, even though kind of like this year, even though they're not that great offensively. But it's a sustained track record now of roller coasters, of peaks and valleys. And that, as a head coach, is what Marcus Freeman has to figure out. It's not for his team to figure out. It's for Marcus Freeman to figure out and how he's going to get that stabilized, because it can ultimately prevent you from being a national champion or at least a playoff team with that kind of up and down peaks and valleys.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I would say is Marcus Freeman needs to get out of this mindset that every week is ultimately different. No, every week is the same, just the opponent changes. Like Notre Dame needs to do and accomplish what they need to. I guarantee, there's game planning and all kinds of stuff, but I guarantee if you go talk to Nick Saban, the way he approached and talked about each game each week was the exact same. It's just the opponent fell into the slot essentially. And I think that's what Marcus Freeman needs. The type of rhetoric that Marcus Freeman needs to get away from is, treating it like opponent by opponent. No, it's just week by week, and the opponent just happens to be who it is.
Yep. Yeah, you can't go, okay, it's business as usual against Northern Illinois and Purdue and Miami, Ohio, or whoever it is. But now we're going to get completely jacked up because it's Texas A&M and Florida State and Louisville probably, and USC and so on and so forth. As much as, well, I won't even go in that direction because Brian Kelly's having his own problems, obviously, at LSU right now. So we can all at least take a little solace in that, I guess. Another one from Joe. Even if the shoulder injury that Leonard has is on the non-throwing shoulder, it's still a hindrance with throwing, as well as making him hesitant to run and getting tackled. He says, if you think about it, quarterback throwing pattern, the non-throwing arm usually goes up as well in the throwing motion. Are you in or out on that?
I mean, it's going to have some sort of hindrance, right? Like,
to me, it depends on the severity of the injury. I'll just say that we don't know how severe it is because it is the non-throwing. Like obviously, if it's something where like the shoulder was dislocated and it's clicking and popping and there's a lot of pain in it, obviously that's going to have a lot more effect. But there's just as great a chance, again, depending on the severity of the injury, that maybe it popped, but it's back in. Maybe it's a little bit sore. And, again, you just go cortisone shot and it's not that big a deal. So I would say that it can, but I think it just depends on how severe it is. And that's what we don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was kind of getting into is I
didn't mean to cut you off again, but
I don't have the injury. I don't know what it feels like, but to me, it's kind of like, I would kind of relate it to, if I were playing baseball and I had basically, some sort of shoulder injury on my glove hand, but when you go to throw the ball, you're still, pulling that kind of arm through, in some degree to when you're throwing, even with your throwing hand, right? So
right. Like
I have to imagine he feels it. It's just to what degree he's going to feel it.
Exactly. Like if you're Tyler Buckner and you broke his, I guess it wasn't the collarbone, but it was like the AC joint where it was much more severe, like down in the joint and, exactly what happened. I think that obviously that was a lot more severe. Otherwise, Riley Leonard wouldn't even be out there trying to play this week.
Right.
But again, like you can pop a shoulder and still be fully functional. It's just a matter of to what degree the injury was. So it could affect some of that, and I think we're going to see some. We'll find out pretty quickly. It could, but I don't think that it necessarily 100% has to affect it. Just depends on how severe the injury actually is. From Preston 459. This is the game Riley Leonard locks in and starts pushing the ball downfield. I'm going to let you answer. I'm going to be right back, okay?
I would have to say for the sake of this offense and for the sake of Riley Leonard continuing to be a quarterback, the starting quarterback at Notre Dame, I do believe I have to go in on this. Because if Notre Dame wants to start to see a progression in the passing game, if they actually want to develop a legit, passing game, and Riley Leonard doesn't want to end up sitting on the bench, then he does have to lock in, and they do have to start pushing the ball downfield. So I will be in on this. I guess I'm curious how they get the ball downfield. To me, again, I would focus on establishing a run game, allowing kind of Purdue to creep up in the box, get into some kind of misdirection RPO plays, get into some play action plays. I think naturally some of the stuff will start to develop downfield. I think you can really find, the Notre Dame running backs in the screen game, and I think you can also start to find the Notre Dame tight ends, coming down the seams essentially as well.
Was that Henry agreeing or disagreeing with the take?
I think it's a disagreement.
And so I missed your answer. I've just got to be out on this one. I just don't think we see an offense that's dramatically and drastically pushing the ball downfield right away. I think this is going to come gradually if they ever get to that. The big thing is finding layups for Riley Leonard to make early. You talked about it earlier in the week. How about a screen pass or two to Jeremiah Love instead of Bo Collins? Like, let Jeremiah Love get some momentum built up coming out of the backfield, hit him, and let him use that speed and athleticism to get out there and make some plays. But then the other side of that is, again, like in the second interception when he was looking deep for Mitchell, he had two guys who were open underneath that he could have hit either one of those. Those are easy layups that he has to see. Now, if the first read is the throw downfield, if that was the design and Chris Mitchell was open down there, he just horribly underthrew that ball. So like if that was the first part of that, maybe for him, they need to kind of, look short before, like you don't have to be looking deep. There are passing plays to be made in this offense for Riley Leonard. He just has to kind of see some of them. And again, it has to do with kind of how he's feeling the pocket, because that's the other side of this as well, is with that injury that he has and with this offensive line that he has. And we talked about the running backs yesterday. The running backs have to contribute a little bit more from a blitz pickup and that kind of thing as well in the passing game. With all that considered, he does look, with all the other things on top of it, he does look somewhat gun shy, stand in the pocket sometimes. But that's going to be compounded if they're asking him to stand in the pocket more. But I think they need to create some layups, let him get in an early rhythm, and a pretty healthy dose of the running game will help him out as well. It's just going to open up so many more things, both for him and for the passing game. So I don't think they're going to necessarily be pushing it downfield. I don't think. Now, that doesn't mean that they might not hit a shot or two, because he had Greathouse deep, and we all know about the drop ball, but I just don't see this big downfield offense emerging. I think that it's something that's going to happen gradually rather than overnight. From KMO 2111, we in or we out, Kenny Minchey starts a game this season.
I would be 100% out on that. I think it's either Riley Leonard or Steve Angeli at this point.
If Kenny Minchey starts a game, that means that, and this is no offense to Kenny Minchey, but that means that there has been a colossal fail in this season, because it means that
be last resort.
Yeah, you've either already turned to Steve Angeli or, someone is injured, and then you're on to Kenny Minchey. Kenny Minchey, if he starts a game, will be the third quarterback to start a game this season for Notre Dame. They're not going to go right from Riley Leonard to Kenny Minchey. So he would be the third starter if that happens. So, again, it's nothing against Kenny Minchey. I still think he's a quarterback with a lot of potential and upside. But in terms of this season, that would what the season would look like to get to that point would not be a good thing, most likely. From Poly 1029, we in or we out. All the captains actually step up this weekend and lead this team to victory. In or out?
I'm in on that. I just need someone to step up offensively. Even if you're not Riley Leonard, and even if you're not, because I believe Riley Leonard's the only offensive captain. Correct me if I'm wrong, but just because you don't have a C on your chest doesn't mean that you can't lead and still, be a guy out there that people can depend on, right? So I think that someone else on the offense outside of a captain needs to step up. And to me, that guy is Jeremiah Love and potentially someone like Bo Collins right now. And I know it's a lot harder for Bo Collins because every play you run the route, you're not guaranteed to touch the ball. But as a running back on a designed run play, you're going to touch the ball, right? And so I think that Jeremiah Love has to be that guy, but also Notre Dame needs to call his number more. And we've talked about, preseason how they were going to get him the ball and they like him so much they're going to put him in the slot. Again, I'm going to keep saying it until I'm blue in the face. Throw the man a simple screen.
That's all you got to do.
That's all it does. That's all it takes is just throw this man a screen and just see what he can do, right? Like allow Riley Leonard to hit a free throw before he's going out there and taking a deep three, right?
Yeah.
Like build up his confidence a little bit. Let him see the ball. Let him see someone catch the ball.
Purdue's going to bring some pressures. It's a perfect answer to the pressure that Purdue wants to bring against Notre Dame with blitzes and whatever else. Just a simple screen to a guy like Jeremiah Love. You beat that first wave and he can be running for a long time. Spencer, the answer to your question is 3. Love has 3 receptions through 2 games. He had 2 this past weekend. He had, or maybe it was 2 the first weekend. He has 3 anyway. He has 3 total. Also, we in, we out. Also, and to the captain's question, yes, I think this is going to be a great test of Notre Dame's team leadership this week to see really what they're made of and how they're able to galvanize. And I think that they're going to come through in that department. In or out, we won't see Marcus Freeman referring to the analytics guy for advice as much this week and coach with more of a plan and feel for his team. In or out on that?
I'm out on that. I still think Marcus Freeman has an idea of what he wants to do in a situation. I think he just kind of goes to his analytics guy to maybe make sure that he's executing at the best, at kind of like the highest level, or maybe there is a better option out there. I think what Marcus Freeman does is he takes what his preconceived notion, takes what the analytics guy says and kind of does a little bit of, maybe let's come up with the best plan here, or maybe the analytics is a better case, or maybe he trusts that, his feel is there in the game. I just think he wants to ultimately have all options. And, maybe that's a bad thing for Marcus Freeman. Maybe he needs to
maybe
just
there's information
make it simple.
overload.
Yeah, exactly. To dumb things down and just kind of go with his gut more so. And so I still think that, you're going to see some of that. But I would say that you might see less of it this week. I think at some point Marcus Freeman just has to trust, who he is as a game caller, essentially.
I think you just need to get the guy on a headset and put him up in the booth. He doesn't need to be standing right behind Marcus
because then
Freeman.
It's a bad look.
Yeah, it is. When the head coach is turning around all the time, I made the Peter Brand, comparison earlier this week in Moneyball. Remember when they were in the meeting in Cleveland and Brad Pitt comes out of the meeting and he finds Peter Brand out there and he's like, "Who are you?" He's like, "I'm nobody." He's like, "You weren't nobody in there because everyone was looking at you in there." And it's it's basically the same thing. It's the analytics guy. It's the data guy. And I mean, there's a place for it. Like some of the things he's referring to, it's like, okay, if we're in this down and distance on this part of the field, what does the data say? Do we go for it? Those kind of things. Or where do we need to be thinking about the timeouts? Those kind of things. Right. But again, it's just a bad look if the head coach is repeatedly turning around and deferring to the little data geek who's got his, booklet of situations on paper. Just get the guy out of sight, out of mind, put him on a headset and make the reference that way. Lancer Irish 70. In or out, Notre Dame's defensive line doesn't get knocked back at the line of scrimmage regularly by Purdue's offensive line.
I have to be in on that. I think you're going to see a much better performance on both lines this week. And I'm sure it was a point of emphasis all week, and I'm sure it was brought up in film. And, there's a way to kind of challenge your players without insulting them. And I definitely think you're going to see both lines getting challenged both lines were challenged this week in practice to not get moved around how they did in that NIU game. So I just have to be in again, if you want to believe in Notre Dame, finding, ways to build off of this loss and ultimately beating Purdue, they have to, like, that. A big part of that is their offensive line not looking, or defensive line looking as bad as they did against NIU.
Yeah. Are you going to challenge yourselves? I think that's the big question, and I think that they will. And this Purdue line, not great last year. It was decent, but I don't think it's, again, it's like, should Purdue's offensive line be better than Northern Illinois' offensive line? Yes, because it's Big Ten versus MAC. But I don't think that Purdue's offensive line is going to be able to impose any kind of physicality the way NIU's did last week. Another one from Lancer Irish.
No, that's the one we just
70. Did. Oh, is it? Did I just? Okay. From Elmer Layden. After a win against Purdue, where the defense plays well and the offense is clearly still struggling, is regarded by Coach Freeman as a good team win, and still no changes from the offense leading up to Miami, Ohio. So basically what he's saying is Notre Dame's going to beat Purdue, but they're still not going to change anything. And Marcus Freeman will say it's a good team win. No changes before next week against Miami. In or out on that?
I'm out on this one. I think that you're going to have to see a change in the offense, and maybe that's better Riley Leonard play. Maybe that's, some of the stuff we've talked about, screens, RPO, moving the pocket, that sort of stuff. I think, to me, the definition of an insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. If you're Notre Dame and it's week 3 and you're doing the same stuff in the passing game and you're getting the same result, then it's just insanity at that point. I think they're smarter than that. I think that you have to try to do stuff, to free up Riley Leonard a little bit more. So I just have to be out because I'm more of a glass half full type of person. And I just believe that these coaches are too smart to continue to allow the same stuff to keep happening, in terms of the passing game on offense.
I do think we'll see some gradual change in this offense, but some of it, again, if you listen to what Marcus Freeman is saying, it's going to do with the combination of the comfort that Riley Leonard has in this system and the confidence that Gino Guidugli and Mike Denbrock have in Riley Leonard to do certain things. They're not there right now. I think it's going to be a very, very gradual change. So I'm going to be out just because I do think that you'll at least see some progressions by Miami, Ohio. I think you're going to have to see some progressions by Miami, Ohio. Tom says Carr is a very accurate and efficient quarterback. They need to pressure him all day. I agree with the pressure. The accurate and efficient. He was only a 58% passer last year. I know he was 24 of 25 in the opener against Indiana State, but we're talking about FCS versus Big Ten, and FBS competition. Card never got to play against an FCS opponent last year. They were all one group of 5, Fresno State, and everybody else was Power 5. So he was 58% last year. I'm not saying he's horrible, but he's not as pinpoint as he looked against Indiana State last week, based on the body of work that he put out there last year.
If I am a Notre Dame fan, Notre Dame's secondary is elite, right?
Yes.
I'm not worried about what Card can do in the passing game. If you're a Notre Dame fan, here's what you have to be worried about. The kryptonite to Al Golden's defense is early success running the game in the drive, first and second down. Look at all these games that Notre Dame has lost. NIU, Marshall, Stanford, Clemson, USC the first time. What was the common denominator, in my opinion, in all of those games? Teams had success running the ball. I think that's the number one thing that is the kryptonite to Al Golden's defense is I think he gets into, getting into kind of getting out schemed in the run game because of his aggressiveness on the defense. But in the Stanford, the Marshall, the NIU, and Caleb Williams running around in that USC game, they could not limit or control the run game, and that ultimately is what bleeds them out, as the game goes on, because it's easy to be a good passer and 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 4, because the pressure is not going to get home, right? Like,
well, and last
you can
week,
just get the ball out quick, and that's what NIU did. They got the ball out quick on a lot of those routes, right at the sticks.
Notre Dame was fairly successful on 1st down last week. They would put NIU into 2nd and long, and that's where they really got hit. And look, like you were talking about it, because Purdue wants to run the ball as well, and they'll do some things similar to what NIU did last week. So, like, the question is, what kind of lesson has Al Golden learned from one week to the next? You talked about it. You don't have to blitz all the time, especially in these running downs, or even if it is 2nd and long. That's probably where part of the lesson has to be learned, is how much you need to do that versus you've got athletes who can make plays. How much pressure do you really need to bring with blitzes and fires and all that kind of stuff versus what comes naturally just because you've got better athletes out there? And they're going to have better athletes across the board than Purdue this Saturday.
Right.
DJ with a loaded question. We in or we out? Marcus Freeman is still coaching at Notre Dame in 2026.
Oh, man, that's a real tough one. So that would be the end of this season and next season. I don't know. I think the fans want Marcus Freeman to solely be graded on what he does in terms of wins and losses. But in terms of the athletic director, I just don't know. Like, that stuff matters, but as long as you're not like 6-6, 7-5, 8-4 every year, like a 9, 10, 11 win, coach every season, and your retention rates are good, your graduation rates are good, your players are doing all that, like that stuff is also looked at as well. So just because they're not, making national championship runs and all this stuff, I just don't think that the athletic department views that as an ultimate, not success, because listen, there's only one national champion winner every season, right? And it's hard to win a national championship. So I guess long story short, I just have to say out, because I don't really see him having an abysmal season outside of some of these basically kind of bad losses that keep popping up every now and then.
Yeah, I mean, are they going to be satisfied with 9-3,
10-2?
Because if you go 9-3, probably 10-2, 10-2, you're going to be on the playoff bubble. Like this year, 10-2 is not going to get you into the playoff because you've already got a bad loss and there's not enough teeth to help you out. Like even 11-1 could be a stretch, just depending on how things shake out at the end of the season. Like how good is USC at the end of the season? Does that become a quality win if they win that game? And again, that's I'm saying if they end up 11-1. But let's not forget that there's a considerable amount of money on the line that comes to your school by making the playoff, because they have opened this thing up. So again, what's the contentment going to be if you're 9-3, you're just outside that playoff picture, you're sitting there with a 9-3 record, and you're going to the Insight Bowl or whatever, the Duke's Mayo Bowl, and all those, whatever bowl it happens to be, instead of an expanded 12-team playoff. Because it was one thing to miss the playoff when it was only 4 teams, but if you consistently miss a couple times in a 12-team field, and already that's in great question this year, they're going to, that's, again, it's going to come back to the people who are writing the big checks. Are you still going to have the alumni writing those big checks, both for NIL, because let's not forget there's a considerable amount of that, that comes from the alums, the big donors of the program, like that NIL money and support for the big facilities and all that stuff. How satisfied are they going to be if they've expanded the dance, but you're missing out on the dance? I am hesitantly out. I am, like a week ago, we wouldn't even be asking this question. I am out that hold it. We in or we out, Marcus Freeman. So I am in. I am a little bit in. Like if I'm scale of 1 to 10, I'm probably a 5.5 that he's going to be here in 2026, because I think this season is going to go a long way toward ultimately answering that. And, like, is he going to find himself on the hot seat at the end of this season? Because if all the other things are going in the direction, recruiting, all this other stuff is going in the direction that it needs to. But at the end of the day, you gotta be more consistent than Tyrone Willingham. You can't be up and down like that. ND Forever 72. If they made a quarterback change and it was Angeli, they could beat every remaining team on their schedule with him. In or out on that?
See, this question is I guess this question does include, you have to take into account Notre Dame has a really good defense, so that helps to a degree. I would say out, because I think there would be a potential issue with USC. That's the game I'd really feel uncomfortable about. The other ones, I would say that there's at least at minimum a 50-50 chance. But against USC, I think they're looking good this year. Their defense is a lot better than what it was last year. They have a really talented quarterback and wide receiver room. And I think you would just need kind of more firepower offensively to beat a team like USC. So I would have to go out.
Yeah, I am out as well. But I would even be worried about Louisville and Florida State, potentially, from a talent standpoint. And even maybe Georgia Tech. Just depending. I want to see a little bit more from Georgia Tech. I know they obviously lost to Syracuse. That was a close game. But, look, if you're playing in these close games, what's it typically come down to? Why do the quarterbacks make all the money? It comes down to the quarterback. That just like last week, it came down to the quarterback, and came down to the quarterback making a really bad decision and a really bad throw, and then it came down to the defense not being able to hold. So I've got to be out on this. Those would be the 3 games I would be the most worried about, because I'm not going to write off Florida State, because there's still pretty good amount of talent on the defensive side of the ball. Their quarterback is obviously in question as well. Bernie saying 9-3, blasphemy. Give the Irish 7 Hail Marys for your sin. Look, I'm not saying they're going to go 9-3. I'm saying if they go 9-3, if that ends up being the thing. And how can you say that they're not? When you lose to Northern Illinois, how can you guarantee anything for the rest of the season and for the next 3 seasons? How can you guarantee anything when you're losing to the Northern Illinois and Marshalls of the world? There's no game that is safe until you literally get a track record of 2 or 3 years saying you're not losing those games anymore. So that's what I'm saying. 9-3 is not out of the question. I'm not saying they're going to go 9-3, but 9-3 is not out of the question. Some of you people even more pessimistic than that right now. Connor Laws, Notre Dame will throw the first touchdown pass of the season against Purdue. In or out on that?
Have to be in. If you're playing odds here, you would hope that, an offense would have a passing touchdown come game 3. I think it's a crazier stat that they don't have one. And so again, playing the odds, I would just they have to find a way to get a passing touchdown this game.
Gotta happen. Totally in on this. You can't go 3 games without a touchdown pass. I don't care. Unless Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love are going to run for 5 touchdowns each. I'm going in. They've got to have a touchdown pass this week. Jeff Brown, I'm going to answer your question about CJ Carr when we get to rapid fire, because we're about to hit that, and the first question of rapid fire has to do with CJ Carr. DK, IB Gold Club. In or out?
Big
Riley
time.
Leonard. Riley Leonard, 175 plus passing yards against Purdue. In or out? I mean, we were talking about 200 yards last week, right? I'm out. I've got to see it. I've got to see it before before I believe it's going to happen. I think he might be around 175 and he might rush for 50 or 60 yards. I'm going to be out on Leonard at 175 yards for now.
I'm going to say over or in. Sorry.
Mitchell Evans, 50 yards, in or out on that?
I'm going to go out on that. I just haven't seen a real concerted effort to get him the ball. Maybe that changes, but I feel like I see like maybe one or two tight end plays a game at this point.
And that's part of the problem because, again, like he hit Evans on that first drive on that little skinny post. What was that, like 15 yards downfield? Like there was more of that to be had in that game and we've talked about this before, between Evans and Greathouse with their size. And then even with Jeremiah Love, like whatever you want to do with him, there are plays to be made over the middle that they're not making. Again, now they threw over, but like Mitchell Evans is there. Like he is such a reliable target. Getting the tight end a little bit more involved in the passing game again, I think would go a long way for a guy like Riley Leonard, who's trying to find his confidence and find his rhythm, especially early on. And Evans has very reliable hands as well. In or out on Jeremiah Love and Special Sauce, rushing for 100 and has a reception for over 10 yards.
Over. Or I'm in. Sorry, in.
I'm in on this as well. I think this is a Jeremiah Love kind of game is what I'm looking at against Purdue. In or out, Greathouse, 70 passing yards. I think he means receiving, but I'm going to be out. I'm not picking anybody to have close to 70. I think 50 is probably the max for anybody right now. So I'm out on that.
I'm going to be out on that as well.
Greathouse has a reception for over 11 yards. I'll go in on that.
I'll go in as well.
Right. Domer Grizz didn't end up with any questions, but looking forward to a great show. I hope we have satisfied you, Domer Grizz. Thank you very much. Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's bring this thing home.
Let's do it. All right. So now I've been promising and teasing CJ Carr talk because he is a hot topic of conversation. And I did ask Marcus Freeman about him today during his media call that he had with us. And Carr has been the scout team quarterback so far. He's done some other stuff, though, as well. So what has the role been for CJ Carr so far?
He's rotated on scout team, as is Kenny Minchie has too. So both of those guys have gotten scout team reps, but also reps with the offense. CJ's developing extremely well, right? He's done a good job in terms of what we've asked him to do as the scout team quarterback, but also what he's been able to do with the offense. He studies the game. He's constantly trying to improve, and he's definitely improving.
Splitting reps with Kenny Minchie, sometimes scout team, sometimes getting some third team reps, which means you're not getting a ton of reps. So what do you think of that?
Honestly, I don't even know what to think about all of the quarterback stuff. It's like we're sitting here talking about, what offense is working best for the quarterback skill set. We're talking about whether Angeli should be getting in, and now we're talking about, is CJ Carr developing as much as he should be? I think that on the roster right now, going into, knowing that Riley Leonard has 1 year left, I would say that CJ Carr, in my opinion, would be the quarterback of the future, assuming nothing else changes. And so I would like to see, him overtake Kenny Minchie in some regards and, potentially even get up to the point where he's, going to overtake someone like Steve Angeli. And I don't know if that happens by the end of the season or what, but it goes back to when you think of a Mike Denbrock offense, I think that of Angeli, Minchie, and Carr gives you the best kind of, boom percentage, essentially, right? The guy who's going to run that offense the best and be the most potent in that offense. So I would like to see more CJ Carr development, knowing kind of what is on the brink next season.
Yeah. And I mean, I think a lot of people are with you, and I don't completely disagree with it either. Like sarcastic Redbeard, if CJ Carr is the future, he should be taking a lot of reps, but that's not what he's taking right now. And I guess at least he's getting some third team reps, like running the actual Notre Dame offense. But look, this is what you got, because you've got 4 scholarship quarterbacks in that room right now. You brought in a transfer, and then nobody transferred out at the end of the spring. And I know that some people are worried, well, if you move CJ Carr up on the depth chart, then you're going to guarantee that, Kenny Minchie transfers or whatever. Look, someone's going to transfer at some point, and you're going to have to look. You're not going to keep all of them. You're just not. When that happens, I don't know. Now, it's going to be what kind of makes things interesting is the NCAA hasn't made this official yet, but they're talking about getting rid of that spring transfer portal window. So if you're going to transfer, it's got to be in the winter now. How does that affect things? But I think that CJ Carr is okay for right now where he is, because you do have more experienced quarterbacks in front of him, but it just seems like kind of a weird little tightrope that they're walking with this thing. Like going back to when they went to New York with the media and they took the backup quarterback, Steve Angeli, with them out there along with Riley Leonard, even though he's a New Jersey guy and all this different stuff. I don't know. Jeff was asking the question, someone brought up the question in We In, We Out, would Steve Angeli win all the rest of the games? Would CJ Carr win all the rest of the games? No. I don't think he would either. I think that he would win a pretty good majority of the games because he has a better feel and a better willingness, really compared to both Leonard and Steve Angeli, what we've seen from both, more willingness to pull the trigger downfield. But I think a true freshman, he's better off where he is probably right now. You would like to probably see him start to take more reps at some point during the season, but I don't know how you manage that because of, again, the fact that you've got 2 other scholarship quarterbacks in between him and Riley Leonard right now. I wouldn't want to have to be balancing all that. Would you?
No, I would not.
That would be the least fun, I think, of the whole thing, is figuring out how you do that. Okay. There's a chance that Josh Burnham, sounds like maybe a pretty strong chance that Burnham is going to miss this week's game with an ankle injury that he suffered last week. He's listed as questionable for the game. And if that happens, then you've got R.J. Oben as well as freshman Bryce Young behind R.J. Oben. And here's Marcus Freeman talking about Bryce Young.
We expect Bryce to be able to have some opportunities to help us. RJ's had a really good week of practice, and that's what we've needed him to do is to, really be healthy and have a great week of practice. And I'm confident he'll have a good game on Saturday. But Bryce is a guy that's continuously gotten better over the course of his time here, and he could be ready to go at any moment. But I would expect him at some point probably be in the game on Saturday.
He didn't play against Northern Illinois after he got a couple of snaps against Texas A&M. What is your confidence in that strong side defensive end position if Josh Burnham is out?
A 3 out of 10. I have not seen anything out of R.J. Oben. I thought he looked slow on film against NIU last week. I thought he did a bad job of setting the edge, and that's something that Marcus Freeman talked about, especially when the team is trying to, run those stretch veer type, run plays to the perimeter. Someone's got to set the damn edge and either force that guy to go horizontally, to the sideline or, force it back inside where the rest of your defense is at. And so, I need to see a lot out of R.J. Oben. And honestly, I thought Burnham has been playing better than RJ Oben, even though he's listed as the second string. And so if Burnham goes down, it's kind of like, to me, the security blanket to RJ Oben, and now you're relying on basically a true freshman, at that point. And so I don't know. When do they maybe decide, is Traore maybe too small to play that true defensive end? Do you allow someone like Junior Tuihalamaka to get into that mix at some point, because he's probably a more of a true strong defensive end than a Viper?
A little bit bigger body.
Yeah, a little bit stronger.
Haven't seen him at all so far on the other side.
Someone who can really, set the edge. But, the whole RJ Oben situation has been, in my opinion, a real letdown. It's a guy they got in the portal. Obviously he came over with Riley Leonard. You don't know what kind of influence Riley Leonard had on that as well. But, he didn't play like this with Duke. He was much more effective. I need to see a lot out of him. And again, I think Burnham has been outplaying him even as the second string guy. And so if he goes down, it's not a situation that I would feel good about.
Yeah, I mean, Sloppy Joe says trying to understand what they saw in Oben to give him the starting job because he looks slow out there. And Josh Burnham has clearly been the better, the best defensive end they've had on that side so far. And Oben does need to step up. It's time for him to kick it into gear. And when you look at the production that he had at Duke, it was better than what Javonte Jean-Baptiste had when he was at Ohio State. And they're both guys deep into their careers, and and they've got about the same body type. JJB might have been just a little bit bigger, but they're pretty similar. And I think that might be kind of what they saw when they were looking at RJ Oben. It's like, wow, this is a similar guy. We got to see him, in action last year going up against Notre Dame's offensive line. They obviously felt pretty good about him, but we just haven't seen anywhere near that kind of production. And that's the biggest thing. As people have said, like, Oben needs to step up. He desperately needs to step up, especially in a game like this, because otherwise, I mean, they'll have to find other options if it doesn't happen. I'm sure they've been working other guys in there this week. An interesting one that has been mentioned this week is our Jason Onye, who played outside when he first came to Notre Dame, but he's beefed up and he's been, more inside. He did play that strong side defensive end last week. It was basically against kind of a jumbo package that Northern Illinois had, like bigger body personnel and stuff like that. And that's why they said they moved him out there. So it doesn't sound like they really consider him an option, but I would have to think, if you're ineffective with one guy and you've got to rotate some bodies, I would think that either Onye or Tuihalamaka would be the two who make the most sense, just as someone, even if you
the edge.
Yeah, just set the edge, hold, be strong. And I think that that's something that Onye could do for sure.
It takes me back to my sophomore high school days where, we played a team that basically was running a triple option at the time, Marion High School. And they asked me to be that defensive end position. And it's really hard because all you need to do is, one, set the edge, and two, in that kind of offense, you got to squeeze down the line if the play isn't going your way. You're just squeezing and kind of mirroring, basically, one, making sure there's no cutbacks, and two, if the quarterback keeps the ball, well, then that's your responsibility. So, to me, that true defensive end position is just it. To me, it's so much fundamentals. You just got to be able to do your job. And again, it's not the most sexy thing at the end of the day, but just set the edge and squeeze down that line of scrimmage. And I think if you can do that, then that's 75% of the battle at the end of the day, because they have, fast and talented linebackers behind them. They have safeties who can come down who are also good in the run game. Exactly. Just do your job and don't allow the big play to break, essentially.
So, which side of the ball do you expect the best performance from this week, offense or defense?
I would have to go defense. I think the defense is the strong point of this team. Thought they were really good against Texas A&M. They caught a lot of flack this week because of that last drive and that big play that broke for the touchdown. And even Al Golden said, we were one drive short essentially. But in my opinion, you held a team to 16 points, and you have, Mike Dimbrack as your offensive coordinator. You have a ton of talent offensively. Holding a team to 16 points should be enough at the end of the day. And I think there's going to be even more of a chip on the shoulder this week. I know Al Golden is going to refine some things, and they're just ultimately going to be better. So, I think a lot of people just expect this offense to click in one game. It never happens like that. I think the offense is going to be better this week, but it's going to be nowhere near perfect. But I definitely think they're going to be better. But the defense, to me, is just what you can rely on game in and game out.
Yeah, you're right. This is probably a softball, but look.
I think I gave good rationale to it, though.
No, I think it did. Look, again, like this to me, from a Notre Dame defensive standpoint, and what they're seeing is somewhat similar. Now, the running back Maccabee is not bad. Carr, again, a guy who came into college with high expectations and high billing, but he only completed 58% through 8 interceptions last year in his only full season playing quarterback. But I don't think that he has. It's similar to Texas A&M in that he's a decent enough quarterback, but he doesn't have near enough overall skill talent, especially at the receiver positions around him in that matchup against Notre Dame's secondary. So I see this like if Purdue is going to be successful, they're going to have to pound it at Notre Dame. And they did have the most rushing yards in the Big Ten last year, but I don't see that being able to have the kind of success like Northern Illinois had last week. So I think it's the defense. I think they're going to give up a low point total. Again, can the offense score 20 points this week? If the offense gets to 20, Notre Dame's going to win. I will guarantee that. Notre Dame and Purdue played every year from 1946 through 2014. Do you miss the yearly rivalry with the Boilermakers?
I do miss the yearly rivalry, and I'll give you a couple reasons why. First reason, I've said this before, I'm just going to echo it. Any rivalry that involves a trophy is a true rivalry to me. For those who don't know, I'll give you a quick history lesson real quick. The Shillelagh is the trophy I'm speaking about that basically travels between Notre Dame and Purdue, and that started in 1957 when an Irish merchant seaman, Joe McLaughlin, brought over the trophy. And so since 1957, there has been a trophy to, basically awarded to the winner of the game. I love those type of games. I love those type of rivalries. I think, it means more when you have a traveling trophy. And then, to get into more kind of like a serious response here, at the same time, I would much rather Notre Dame pick up this rivalry and kick a team like Miami of Ohio or NIU to the curb, because if you lose to Purdue, at least it's a Big Ten team. And to me, it's not nearly as embarrassing. But when you lose to someone like NIU, a MAC team, someone that you're supposed to roll over, as your home opener, it's a lot worse of a loss on paper, right? And you're going to get a lot more national attention for a loss to NIU compared to Purdue. And so if we can bring back a good, long-standing traditional rivalry game, kick out one of those MAC opponents, then one, it should theoretically boost your strength of schedule. And two, if you lose to someone like Purdue, it's not nearly as bad as losing to someone like NIU.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. Where to begin? I don't miss the particular year in, year out with Purdue because like living in this town with as many Purdue fans as there are around here. I mean, look, they've got stepchild syndrome and they can get just nasty about it. And that's what I don't miss is just like the constant, the chip on their shoulder fan crap. And, like Joe Tiller probably played into it back in the day as well when he was still around, when they were playing every year. That's what I don't miss about Purdue. I do miss having some of these rivalry games. And I think that I got this started up. I agree with Andrew. I miss
give me a nice rotation.
Michigan State could be pretty nasty as well, but I do miss Michigan State and Michigan more than Purdue. And you're absolutely right. Like if you did like a 6-year rotation where it was like home and home Michigan State, home and home Michigan, home and home Purdue, and then you rotated back through it again, I think that would be great. actually.
You can
So that
even add Ohio State in there, just regionally Big Ten teams that you can just keep cycling between. And again, it's just much better for the fans. It's much better for your schedule. I just don't really see a downside of it. And if we're being completely honest, like Michigan State and Purdue, what have they done in a long time? It's not like you're giving yourself this overly dominant, like this isn't the early 2000s when Michigan State was good and when Drew Brees was playing for Purdue. Like it's not those type of teams anymore, right? And so I think you can take advantage of the kind of, the current status or the current, performance of some of these programs at the end of the day.
Yeah. Those schedules were different back. I mean, I know that like everyone
Those were heavy Big Ten.
Yeah, like you look at the schedules now versus back then, and they definitely looked a lot different. I just always felt like now Michigan was never annually on there, but Purdue and Michigan State were, and there was a healthy dose of even Pittsburgh and Boston College. And I just felt like by having so many of those long-standing rivalries on there, those games always meant more to the other team than they meant for Notre Dame. And I felt like it was hard for Notre Dame to get up to the same level week in and week out the way those opponents were getting up for them. So I wouldn't want them all on the schedule at the same time, but I do like the idea of a rotation.
Andrew beat me to this. I do agree. Jonathan Smith is going to, get Michigan State back to more of their kind of, regular 8-4, 9-3, 10-2, and maybe kind of a really good season every fourth or fifth season. But I mean, Michigan State's been kind of bad for a while now, right? But I do think that they're on the right track of kind of recovering.
Well, they had that 1 year, and then they gave their coach a big contract.
Yeah,
and look how that worked out. Yeah, really good decision. Really good judge as a character, apparently. Which team do you feel more differently about right now compared to 2 weeks ago? Florida State, USC, or Notre Dame?
I'd just have to go with Notre Dame. I think Florida State, has more of a proven, they're more consistent in their bad play than Notre Dame is in really good play and then really bad play. It's like an up and down roller coaster, right? I think USC is more streamlined as well. Like I expected them to have, listen, their head coach is Riley Leonard. It's still USC. They still get good quarterbacks and good wide receivers. Lincoln Riley. They're going to be good offensively. The only thing that surprises me is I think they've actually recovered some on defense this season. I think they're moderately better, which goes a long way with how bad they were, in the past couple of seasons. So to me, it has to be Notre Dame to go from winning a type of game like they did against Texas A&M on the road in that environment, and then to coming home and laying an egg like that against NIU. I just think it's two completely different games, and ultimately, I didn't expect the offense to look this bad 2 consecutive weeks as well.
It's got to be Notre Dame for me as well, because look, we all felt like they were legitimate college football playoff contenders a week ago with a chance to grow into national championship contenders. But all bets are off the table right now. We're really trying to figure out what they are, because even for a Florida State team with a couple of losses, I mean, they still lost conference games. Like those were ACC games. So like at least you can kind of not write them off, but you can justify them to some extent. They were against Power 5 teams and in your conference. USC, nice win over LSU. I'm not completely sold. I want to see exactly what they're going to be once they get into Big Ten play for the first time, just how physical they can actually be with somebody. So it's Notre Dame for me as well. It would go Notre Dame, Florida State, USC would be my ranking in terms of how differently I feel about them. Yeah, it's a good point, Jeff. Notre Dame had fewer question marks in those teams coming into the season and a lot of returning talent with a good schedule. So I agree. It's got to be Notre Dame. Is Northern Illinois more likely to run the table this season or lose 4 games like Marshall did 2 years ago?
I'm going to be optimistic, but also rational at the same time. I want Northern Illinois to run the table. We all obviously if they can go on and be the Group of 5 champion and make the playoff, that is, best case scenario. But they have a good amount of work ahead of them. But if you look at their schedule, I don't think it's totally unattainable. I think, to me, their ceiling at this point, their floor is 8-4. And their ceiling could be upward of, 11-1, 10-2 potentially, right? I think if you look at their schedule, the hardest teams that they have left are NC State, who isn't looking quite as good as I think people thought. And I think that's an interesting matchup that'll happen not this week, but next week. And then I think Toledo, just because they're always the top of the MAC. And then Miami of Ohio, really, because they just won the MAC last year, but they're off to an 0-2 start themselves, right? And so, again, I think this is a team that ranges from 8-4 to 10-2, but I'm going to lean more so on the 10-2 side because I do think, based off what I saw, they're a really well-coached team. They know how to go out and execute a game plan. And I think that this type of win kind of gives them the confidence that they could need for the rest of the season to say, you know what, we can go toe-to-toe with anyone, right? It doesn't matter who we're playing against. We've proven to ourselves that we can win some of these tough, big games.
Miami's just 0-1, but their losses to Northwestern. So it's okay, well, look, they lost to a Power 5 team, but look at Northern. You want the answer to be they're going to run the table. You look at Marshall a couple of years ago, they quickly became everyone's darling, just like Northern Illinois has become. The curious part about this whole thing, Purdue had a bye last week, the week before playing Notre Dame. Northern Illinois got its bye this week. They're not going to play this weekend, so they can kind of ride that emotion a little bit, but then how are they going to deal with it once they come back? And I think that maybe that catches them a little bit of a break, that they didn't have to turn around in a week's time and play right away. But you're right, NC State should be the toughest team that they play the rest of the way. But I think it's more likely that they lose 4 games than run the table. I don't think that they will end up running the table. I think that they'll kind of get caught up in this whole thing, and I wouldn't be surprised if they lose a couple of games in a row somewhere along the way.
The stinky thing about this and what kind of probably played to Northern Illinois' advantage, but will kind of maybe trip them up down the road is they got the advantage of playing. And again, this is not an excuse. Notre Dame should have won this game no matter what. But I think it's a lot easier to pull off something like this early in the season when there's not a lot of tape out there.
Right.
I think Notre Dame, yes, they can game plan, but you don't know to the extent of what it's easier to game plan for a team when there's eight games of film compared to, 1 week of film. Right. And I think that goes the same way for NIU defensively for doing what they did against Notre Dame because Notre Dame only had one tape out there. And instead of maybe trying to mix things up or add some wrinkles, I think Northern Illinois just kind of looked at the Texas A&M game and were like, hey, these are the things we need to do well. And if we can execute, we can win this game essentially. Right. And so I think that ultimately is what's going to hurt Northern Illinois as the season goes on, because more of that kind of, again, what I would say gimmicky kind of stuff, right? It's more on tape, and it allows defensive coordinators to also see what other teams did to successfully
they can start preparing for it. That's exactly right. And that is part of the deal when you play these early season games, is you're going to see some stuff that hasn't been put on tape before. And, again, I do think Notre Dame should beat Purdue. I my gut tells me it's going to be a relatively close game, until Notre Dame figures out some things offensively, which we'd covered pretty extensively this week and here today as well. But there is, Purdue's only played one game, and it was against Indiana State. So there's a pretty good chance that they're going to try to throw some stuff out there that Notre Dame hasn't seen before, considering they have only played one game, and they won that game very handily, 49-0 over Indiana State. So I think that there's going to be some stuff that Al Golden hasn't seen so far on on tape. So Boise State, Colorado State, Fresno State, and San Diego State are going to join Oregon State and Washington State in the Pac-12, beginning with the 2026-27 academic year. What do you think of this move?
Yeah, I think this is a smart move. I believe, when we were kind of having this conversation last year and kind of maybe deciding what would happen with the Pac-12, will it eventually disintegrate and fold into, the group of five / the Power Four, or do they find other teams that regionally make sense to kind of join them and form this new sort of, Pac-12, right? And I think Boise State, Colorado State, Fresno State, San Diego State are all programs that kind of fit geographically and also, fit for teams that I think have developed into kind of solid, football programs over the last few years, right? Like even, BCS era Boise State made a run. And I think Colorado State is, developing as a program as well. Like look at what Fresno State did against Michigan in that game week 1. Like they had Michigan on the ropes. I don't think that any of these programs, I guess, are a slack. And I know San Diego State has been a team that's always kind of on the edge of the top 25, even though they're not in a group of 5 conference. A Power 5 conference when the Power 5 was still around. So I think it makes sense. And I am I'm excited to see, what the Pac-12 kind of develops into now, how they redefine or remold their conference.
Yeah. I don't know how excited I am about this. There's 6 teams in the Pac-12. Like, I guess it's better than nothing if you're Oregon State and Washington State, how much stature it's actually going to give you. Like everyone probably would have loved to have Boise State a few years ago. Like Jeff is saying, I think Cal and Stanford should return now. Makes sense for them because the ACC is going to implode. I mean, I don't think the ACC is going to implode because the buyout is still there. If anything, the ACC added these 2 teams to help kind of protect themselves from imploding should either Clemson or Florida State actually be able to work their way out or, pay the money to get out. Cal and Stanford, part of the reason for, why, Cal and Stanford made this move to the ACC, one, to save themselves. They had some other options, but they, the academic thing is part of what has prevented teams like Boise State, for example, from coming into the Pac-12 in the past. Cal and Stanford want to keep, their academic standing, and at the end of the day, they just feel like they're too good for some of these other schools. So I don't think they're going to return to the West until, maybe they do get through this year, the next couple of years, and go, man, we're really tired of all this travel out to the East Coast. Yeah. And, so maybe that does push them back there. But, at least for now, based on what they've always kind of tried to prop themselves up with before, I don't think they're going to make that move. This is a good one from Tommy. It's the State University Conference, or the SUC for short, SUC. Dang. I like that. Not bad. I do think it's a new group of 5 conference, basically. And Stymie says the Pac State Conference. Not bad. Didn't get this question in earlier from Brent. I forgot that I had this in here. Was the A&M win, was A&M a better win, or was NIU a worse loss?
Sorry, my dog was literally, you would think that we were being broken into. I would say that the NIU is a worse loss than the A&M win. I think if you flip it, and Notre Dame lost to A&M but beat NIU, there would be a lot more kind of like the national conversation would be, well, Notre Dame didn't quite beat A&M. That was kind of expected because remember, they were the underdog in that game, right? I think it is way worse to come home and lose and lay an egg like they did against NIU. And I think if we're talking playoff chances, all things considered, Notre Dame would have a better chance if those losses were reversed as well. So I have to go with the NIU loss being worse.
I am as well. I mean, you still beat an SEC team on the road in that environment. Everybody wrote you off, and then you lost to a MAC team. So I think NIU has to be worse. Question from Andrew: do we think that the Pac-12 would try to pick off some AAC teams or Sun Belts? An interesting question. Like how much do they care about geography? Because like most of the Sun Belt is so far out to the east. I mean, you do have some Texas schools and Louisiana schools in there. Tulane from the AAC would probably make some sense because you do have, like New Orleans, and you've got some academics there. Again, like I don't know how much that even matters anymore, but at least in terms of it was a school that was just in a New Year's Six bowl a couple of years ago, so it would, like that would make a little bit of sense. But really, you start adding all these different, I realize you need some numbers and stuff like that, but I do think at some point it just becomes an overglorified group of five. Like how seriously are they even going to be taken? What kind of stature,
I don't know, though,
are the other
the
Power
portal,
Four conferences going to give them?
I truly believe with the portal, these things are going to level out. There's always going to be an opportunity for some of these guys to be a starter somewhere, and even if that means going to a school like Fresno State, Boise State for a year or two, and then hitting the portal again to go back to maybe a more big time school. But it's just like Idaho, right? Like I saw this quote the other day and said, if you come to play to Idaho, why not come for 2 years instead of one? Because after your first year, you're probably going to get hit up, in the portal and get, maybe like $100,000 in terms of NIL money. But if you wait and have another good year, then that paycheck's going to get even bigger by the time some of those schools come knocking. And so again, I just think with the transfer portal and NIL, and it's just we're just getting into this new beast of both of those things. I just truly believe that, some of these, lesser colleges or, non-power 4 or 5, whatever you want to say, schools that were kind of more so looked down upon, I think that the playing field is going to become more equal, especially as things go on. And so, I don't buy it as, basically, these things kind of disintegrating or turning into maybe a lesser of a conference. Because I do think a lot, like some of these teams are going to start to get better or at least be more competitive.
Well, they're going to have to, just by the fact that they're going to be moving into conferences, and, they're going to have, like competition and all that kind of stuff. Sloppy Joe says Eastern Washington maybe makes the jump up. That could be an option for them. I mean, they're going to want to get more teams in there at some point. How selective they are, where they come from, all that kind of stuff. At least it's a move for them right now. 6 is better than 2. So at least they'll have 6 teams here in the very near future. And of course, the Mountain West is not going to be very happy. They're going to be cashing their big checks because I think it's like an $18 million buyout to get out of the Mountain West, which is still a much more feasible check than anyone in the ACC would have to pay to get out right now. Well, that's going to do it. I told you we had a lot to cover today, and I think we covered
nearly 2 hours worth.
Yeah, I think we covered quite a bit of it. So good stuff. Don't forget, IB Countdown to Kickoff will come your way tomorrow night. We record tomorrow afternoon, and we will have it up. I think I had it posted by, a little after 7 o'clock, maybe something like that, right around 7 last week. So hopefully in that ballpark, as long as we don't have any complications. Thank you very much, gents and ladies who might be out there as well. Jesse switching from Paul Skeens to his Cody Bellinger hat, just as the show ends. Appreciate everybody for being here, and we will talk to you later. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the game on Saturday. And again, IB Countdown to Kickoff comes your way Friday night. So look for it dropping, whether it's on YouTube or your podcast platforms as well. Also, there's a bonus coming your way on YouTube tonight on the Irish Breakdown YouTube channel, and in the podcast, there is an interview with Purdue insider Nathan Baird. We covered some of the Purdue stuff, so you will find that there on both podcast and YouTube. Jesse, I will talk to you later. Everybody else, thanks again. Hit the like button before you leave. IB Nation Sports Talk.